Maya had learned to love the silence of apartment 4B. She'd been living in the Riverside Gardens complex for 8 months now, and in that time, she'd gotten to know nearly everyone. Mrs. Chun on the 3rd floor always had leftover dumplings. Jerome from 2A worked nights and nodded tiredly at her in the hallways. The Rodriguez family threw loud but joyful parties every other weekend. But apartment 5B, directly above hers, was different. The man who lived there never spoke, never smiled, never even acknowledged her presence when they passed in the stairwell, which was rare because he hardly ever left. His blinds stayed drawn day and night. The other residents had their theories. Drug dealer, Mrs. Chun whispered over tea. Witness protection, Jerome suggested. Maybe he's just shy, Maya had offered, though even she didn't believe it. There was something about him that unsettled her. Not threatening exactly, but aware, like he saw everything without being seen. She'd catch glimpses of him sometimes. A tall, thin silhouette with dark skin and graying temples, always wearing the same gray hoodie, always moving quickly as if the sunlight might burn him. Then came the note. It was a Tuesday night, late September, when Maya found it on her doormat. Her name was written on the outside in careful, deliberate handwriting. Maya Thompson. Inside, the message was brief. Asterisk, I know what happened. Meet me at the courtyard at midnight if you want answers. Asterisk. Maya's breath caught in her throat. What happened? What could this stranger possibly know about her? She thought of the accident 3 years ago, the one she never talked about, the reason she'd left Atlanta in the first place. No, that was impossible. Nobody here knew about that. She checked her phone. 10:47 p.m. She had an hour and 13 minutes to decide if she was brave enough or foolish enough to go. At 11:58 p.m., Maya stood in her doorway, dressed in jeans and a jacket. Her phone clutched in her hand with 911 already typed in. This was insane. She should stay inside, lock her door, pretend she never saw the note. But the words haunted her. I know what happened. She thought of her younger brother, Marcus. The accident. The guilt that had carved itself into her bones and refused to leave. The courtyard was empty when she arrived. The fountain in the center burbled softly, its water catching the moonlight. Maya checked her phone. 12:01 a.m. Hello? She called out. Nothing. Then she heard it. Footsteps behind her. She spun around. It was him. The man from 5B. Up close, she could see deep lines around his eyes. A scar along his jawline. He wasn't as old as she'd thought. Maybe mid-40s, but he looked weathered. You came, he said quietly. His voice was surprisingly gentle, with a slight southern accent that reminded her of home. Who are you? Maya demanded. What do you want from me? He glanced around the courtyard, then back at her. My name is James. James Thompson. The world tilted. Thompson. I'm your uncle, Maya. Your father's younger brother. Maya's mouth went dry. Her father had died when she was 7. She had vague memories of him. His laugh, his cologne, the way he'd lift her onto his shoulders. But an uncle? Her mother had never mentioned a brother-in-law. That's impossible, she whispered. Your mother wouldn't have told you about me, James said, his eyes sad. We had a falling out years ago, before your father died. But I've been keeping track of you, making sure you were safe. Safe from what? James looked away. From the truth about Marcus's accident. The name hit her like a physical blow. How do you know about that? Because it wasn't an accident, Maya, and the person responsible has been closer to you than you realize. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Now back to the story. Over the next 20 minutes, sitting on the cold stone bench by the fountain, James unraveled everything. Marcus's car crashed 3 years ago. The one that had put him in a wheelchair and filled Maya with suffocating guilt because she'd been the one driving. Hadn't been her fault. The brakes had been tampered with. Someone had deliberately tried to hurt them. Who? Maya's voice broke. Your mother's boyfriend at the time. Richard Graham. Maya's head snapped up. Uncle Rick? No. He loved Marcus, He loved both of us. He loved your mother's money, James corrected. Your father had a life insurance policy. A big one. It was supposed to go to you and Marcus when you turned 25. But if something happened to both of you before then, it would revert to your mother. And Richard had convinced her to add him as a beneficiary. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. The way Richard had insisted on fixing her car that week. How he'd seemed so concerned, so helpful. The way he'd disappeared from their lives shortly after the accident. Why didn't you tell someone? Maya demanded. The police. James's expression darkened. I tried. I went to your mother with evidence. But she didn't want to believe me. She chose him over the truth. She chose him over me. When I kept pushing, she got a restraining order. Said I was harassing her, that I was unstable. I lost my family that day. So why now? Why reach out after all this time? Because Richard's back. The words hung in the air like poison. What? He's been living 2 buildings down for the past 6 weeks. I saw him 3 days ago, watching you come home from work. Terror flooded Maya's veins. You're sure? James pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking the man's face. Older, grayer, but still Richard. I moved here to protect you, James said quietly. I know I'm a stranger to you. I know this sounds crazy, but your family, Maya, and I failed to protect Marcus. I won't fail again. The next few days passed in a blur. Maya contacted a lawyer who helped her file for a protective order. She visited Marcus in Atlanta, telling him everything, watching his face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally understanding. I always wondered, Marcus said quietly. The mechanic said the brake line looked deliberately cut, but Mom insisted it was just wear and tear. James provided everything he had. Financial records showing Richard's debts, testimony from a mechanic who'd been bribed to stay quiet, photographs documenting Richard's suspicious behavior. It wasn't enough for a criminal case. Too much time had passed, but it was enough to make Richard disappear again. The police visited him. 2 days later, his apartment was empty. On a Sunday morning 2 weeks later, Maya knocked on James's door with a bag of bagels and 2 coffees. He opened the door slowly, surprise flickering across his face. Maya, can I come in? His apartment was sparse but clean. Pictures on the wall, and Maya's breath caught when she saw them. Photos of her father as a young man, laughing. Photos of James and her father as boys, arms around each other's shoulders. And recent photos of Maya, at her college graduation, at a 5K run, outside her nonprofit's office. I know it seems creepy, James said quickly, but I just wanted to know you were okay. That's all I wanted. Maya turned to him, tears blurring her vision. Why didn't you fight harder? Why didn't you make Mom listen? Because she was grieving, James said simply. Losing your father broke something in her. And when people are broken, sometimes they hold onto the wrong things just to feel whole again. I was angry for a long time, but I understand now. Maya set down the coffees and crossed the room. She wrapped her arms around her uncle, this stranger who was family, this silent guardian who'd lived above her for months without saying a word. Thank you, she whispered, for watching over me, for telling me the truth. James's arms came around her, tentative at first, then firm. You're welcome. And Maya, I'm sorry about Marcus. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. It wasn't your fault. And it wasn't mine either. For the first time in 3 years, Maya felt the weight begin to lift. They started having breakfast together every Sunday. James told her stories about her father. The good memories, the silly ones, the moments that made her dad real instead of just a fading photograph. Maya introduced him to her friends, to Jerome and Mrs. Chan and the Rodriguez family. Slowly, James started opening his blinds, started saying hello in the hallways, started existing in the world again instead of just watching it. Maya learned something crucial. Sometimes the people who seem the strangest, the most isolated, the most unknowable, sometimes they're the ones who see you most clearly. Sometimes they're the ones who've been protecting you all along, from shadows you didn't even know were there. Sometimes silence isn't absence. Sometimes it's love keeping watch. 3 months later, Maya stood in her mother's living room in Atlanta, James beside her. Her mother looked older, smaller than Maya remembered. The revelation about Richard had devastated her, but it had also freed her. "I should have listened to you," her mother said to James, her voice breaking. "I should have believed you." James took a step forward, and after a long moment he nodded. "We all make choices we regret, but we're here now. That's what matters." Maya watched her mother and uncle embrace, watched years of pain begin to mend, and she understood. The note under her door hadn't just been a warning. It had been an invitation to face the past, to uncover the truth, to reclaim the family that had been fractured. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept that invitation, even when it comes from a stranger who never speaks, even when it arrives at midnight, even when it changes everything. If the story moved you in any way, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one.